Get out! Victoria Langston's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The young caregiver standing across from her flinched as fragments skidded across the polished floor. 23. That made 23. The caregiver stammered something about trying her best, about patience, about understanding the adjustment period. Victoria didn't blink. I said, get out. The woman fled. The front door slammed. Silence swallowed the mansion again. Victoria sat motionless in her motorized wheelchair in the center of the vast living room. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Silvercrest Heights, illuminating the awards still boxed in the corner. The frame magazine covers had been turned face down. The grand piano hadn't been touched in months. She stared at the empty doorway. 23. They always left. They always pretended they wouldn't. The house manager hovered at a distance, hesitant. Ms. Langston? We'll find someone else. Victoria's jaw tightened. Don't. But he already was. Across town, Ethan Brooks was arguing with his van. Come on, he muttered, turning the ignition again. The engine coughed and rattled as it resented him personally. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel once. Just once. He didn't have the luxury of a tantrum. His phone buzzed. His sister Lily. You paid the electricity bill, right? She asked without greeting. Working on it. Mom's pharmacy called. Night insurance won't cover the new dosage. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. How much? She hesitated. More than we have. He swallowed. I'll figure it out. He always said that. He delivered groceries, packages, restaurant orders, whatever paid that day. He didn't complain. He didn't have time to. That afternoon, he drove through Silvercrest Heights for a high-priority grocery drop. The gate at the Langston estate opened slowly after security confirmed his delivery. The mansion was enormous but quiet in a way that felt heavy. Not peaceful. Heavy. Inside, 2 staff members were whispering. She drove another one out this morning. That's 23. They doubled the pay and still... Ethan didn't mean to listen, but he did. Double? He asked before he could stop himself. The house manager glanced at him. You interested in being screamed at by a billionaire in a wheelchair? Ethan forced a half smile. Depends on how much screaming. The manager gave him a long look. You wouldn't last a day. Maybe not, Ethan thought. But the pharmacy bill burned in his mind. That night, he sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment while his mother dozed in the next room. He studied the numbers, rent, medication, Lily's tuition. He thought about the whispered word, double. He didn't call immediately. He stared at the phone for a long time first. Then he dialed. Victoria didn't look impressed when Ethan stood in front of her the next morning. He wasn't polished. His jacket was worn but clean. His hands showed work, not privilege. You? She said flatly. Yes. You have medical certification? No. Physical therapy training? No. So what exactly qualifies you to handle someone like me? He didn't hesitate. I've been handling someone like you for 3 years. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? My mother, she hates being helped, especially by her son. He kept his tone calm. I learned to announce what I'm doing, to wait, to listen even when she's not speaking. Victoria studied him longer this time. You're not afraid of me? She asked. I don't know you yet. The honesty landed awkwardly in the air. You'll quit, she said. Maybe. That wasn't the answer she expected. She looked away first. You start on trial. 1 week. The first hour was a test. She refused lunch, and then accused him of trying to starve her when he took the tray away. She pressed the call button repeatedly just to see how quickly he would come. He came every time. Stop hovering, she snapped. I'll wait outside, he replied. She asked him to adjust the curtains, then complained they were wrong, then demanded they be returned to how they were. He adjusted them again, no argument, no sigh. At one point, she knocked a stack of papers onto the floor deliberately. Ethan knelt and gathered them slowly, aligned the edges before placing them back on her desk. You think you're patient? She said coldly. I think you're angry, he answered. Her head snapped toward him. That wasn't an insult, he added quietly. She didn't respond, but she didn't dismiss him either. By day 3, she had cataloged his reactions. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He didn't overstep. On day 4, she refused dinner entirely. He set it on the side table within reach. "It'll be here if you change your mind." 2 hours later, it was gone. He didn't mention it. That evening, as he prepared to leave, she spoke without looking at him. "Why do you need the money?" He paused. He could have lied, could have said he wanted experience. "My mom's kidneys are failing," he said simply. "And my sister shouldn't have to quit school because I couldn't make rent." Silence stretched. "That's not my problem," she said finally. "I know." He left. In his van, but he exhaled deeply for the first time all day. At home, Lily studied at the kitchen counter. "How was it?" "She didn't throw anything today." "That's good?" "It's something." Victoria lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't tried to inspire her. He hadn't pitied her. He hadn't told her she was strong. He just stayed. On the 6th day, she ordered him to remove the boxes of framed awards stacked in the corner. "Trash them," she said. He lifted one. It was studying it briefly before placing it carefully on the sideboard instead. "You didn't follow instructions," she observed. "I did," he said. "They're out of the corner." Her lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Don't rearrange my life," she warned. "I wouldn't dare." Later that afternoon, her wheelchair jerked unexpectedly during a transfer. For a split second, panic flashed across her face before she masked it. "Careful," she hissed. "I've got you," he said evenly. When he knelt to eye level instead of towering above her. "I won't move unless you say so." The air shifted. She nodded once. That night, rain battered the windows. Wind howled across Silvercrest Heights. The power flickered. Victoria hated storms. Ethan noticed her grip tighten on the armrests. "It's just wind," he said gently. "It's not just wind," she replied. The lights went out. Total darkness. The backup generator hesitated. Her wheelchair beeped sharply, low battery warning. Her breathing changed. "Don't drop me," she whispered before she could stop herself. He crouched in front of her, voice steady. "I won't. If this moment hits you the way it's hitting right now, pause for a second and tap that like button. Stories like this deserve to be shared. And if you want to see how far this storm pushes them, make sure you're subscribed, because this is only the beginning." The generator kicked in with a groan, and a thin line of emergency light blinked along the hallway, barely enough to make the mansion feel less like a tomb. Victoria's wheelchair emitted another warning beep. The sound was small, but it cut through the dark like a siren. Ethan kept his voice low, steady, like he was talking someone down from a ledge. "Okay, we're going to move slowly." Victoria's fingers were white around the armrest. "If that chair dies—" "It won't," Ethan said, even though he didn't know that for sure. And if it does, I'm still here." The wind slammed into the windows again. Somewhere upstairs, a door rattled like it was trying to open itself. Victoria swallowed hard. "Don't touch me without telling me." Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see it well. "I'm going to put my hand on the back of the chair, just to guide it. Is that okay?" A pause, then, barely, "Yes." He did exactly what he said. One hand steadying the chair, the other holding a flashlight he'd grabbed from a drawer. If the beam cut through shadows and made the familiar hallway feel strange, like the mansion was a different place at night, bigger, colder, less forgiving. The elevator was dead. The staircase loomed at the end of the corridor like a threat. Ethan didn't take her upstairs. He didn't even suggest it. "We stay on this level," he said. "Less risk?" Victoria exhaled shakily, as if the word risk had a taste she hated. He guided her toward the living room, nice where the fireplace sat dark and useless without a match. The temperature dropped fast. The house held its chill like it had been saving it for moments like this. Ethan found candles in a drawer, struck a lighter, and one by one, warm light bloomed around them. The living room shifted from hostile darkness to a dim, flickering shelter. Victoria watched him with narrowed eyes. "You prepared for this?" "I prepared for life," he replied. "Nah, it's always something." He crouched beside the wheelchair again. "Your chair battery. How long does it usually last once it starts warning?" Victoria's throat worked. "Depends. Could be an hour, could be less." Ethan nodded. "Okay, we conserve. No unnecessary movement." She stared at him like she wanted to accuse him of being calm on purpose, like it was some trick. "You're too calm," she said. Ethan glanced up. "Would you prefer panic?" Her mouth tightened. "No." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. No signal. He didn't say it, didn't need to. Then Victoria's voice, small and angry all at once. "I hate this." Ethan stayed quiet. "I hate needing help." She swallowed, and her eyes flashed in the candlelight. "I built half of Seattle's waterfront projects. I negotiated contracts that made grown men cry. I used to walk into rooms and everyone stood up." Ethan didn't look away. And now my body won't obey me." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she went still as she hated herself for letting it slip. Ethan didn't rush to comfort her with pretty words. He just said, "That's terrifying." Victoria blinked hard. "Don't pity me." "I'm not," Ethan said. "I'm telling the truth." Silence stretched long enough for the wind to sound like an animal outside, then a sharp beep. Victoria flinched. "It's dropping." Ethan moved immediately, slow, careful. "Okay, we need to get you to a safer position in case it dies." "No," her voice rose. "No, don't." Ethan stopped, hands up. "I'm not moving you yet. I'm explaining. Is that okay?" Her breathing was quick. "Yes. If the chair dies, the controls lock. You'll be stuck in whatever position you're in." Ethan kept his tone like a guide. "We need you to sit comfortably. We need your feet positioned properly. We need you stable." Victoria stared at him, fighting the instinct to refuse. Refusing was the only power she had left when fear grabbed her. Then she whispered, "Okay." Ethan nodded once. "I'm going to adjust the chair. I'm going to touch the left lever. You tell me if you feel uncomfortable." Her jaw clenched. "Fine." He adjusted the chair slowly, narrating every movement. It took longer. It wasn't efficient, but it gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time. Control. The chair beeped again, then went silent. Victoria froze. Did it die?" Ethan tried the controls. Nothing. "It died," he said gently. "But you're stable." She stared ahead, shoulders tense, eyes bright with fury and fear. "So now I'm trapped." "No," Ethan said. "Now you're safe." Victoria let out a laugh that sounded like it hurt. "Safe, in a dead chair, in a dark mansion, with a delivery driver telling me I'm safe." Ethan didn't take the bait. He stepped closer, lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. I'm going to ask you something," he said. "What?" "Do you trust me enough to let me help you move to the couch?" Her eyes flashed. "Absolutely not." Ethan nodded. Lash expected it. "Okay, then we don't." Victoria blinked. That wasn't how this usually went. People argued, they pushed, they insisted, they tried to win. Ethan simply sat on the floor a few feet away, back against the couch, candlelight warming one side of his face. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Staying," he said. "It's cold. You shouldn't be alone." Her voice dropped. "I'm always alone." Ethan's face softened for a moment. "Not tonight." The wind hit again, and this time, Victoria's body reacted before her pride could stop it. A tremor ran through her hands. Ethan noticed, but didn't mention it. Minutes passed, then more. The mansion creaked like an old ship. Finally, Victoria spoke, quiet and sharp. "Why haven't you quit?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought of his mother, waking up at 3 a.m., that with sugar crashes and refusing to admit she was scared. He thought of Lily pretending she was fine while her tuition notices piled up. He thought of his own exhaustion, the kind that didn't get cured by sleep. "Because leaving is easy," he said. "Staying is harder, but it's what needs doing." Victoria's eyes shimmered, and she turned her head slightly to hide them. "You don't even know me." "I know pain," Ethan replied. And I know what it looks like when someone is using anger to keep people far enough away that they can't leave you." Her head snapped toward him. "That's not—" Ethan didn't flinch. "You pushed 23 people away before they could abandon you. That way, you can say you chose it." Victoria's lips parted. The words hit too close, too precise. Candlelight flickered, and for the first time, her armor didn't fit as tightly. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, voice suddenly stripped bare. I didn't ask to be like this." Ethan's throat tightened. "I know." Victoria looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "When you transfer me, when you touch me, It feels like I'm not me anymore. Ethan swallowed. Then we do it differently. How? We ask, Ethan said. Every time, we explain. Every time, we go at your pace. You don't lose dignity because you need help. A long silence. Then Victoria's voice, smaller. What if I fall? Ethan leaned forward slightly. Then I catch you. But I won't rush you, and I won't pretend you're not afraid. She stared at him, and for the first time, her eyes weren't trying to cut him down. They were trying to understand him. Outside, the storm began to ease. The wind softened into rain. The mansion, still dark, felt less hostile. Ethan stood slowly. The couch is closer to the fireplace. It might be warmer. Do you want to move? Victoria hesitated. Her pride fought her. Her fear fought her. Her loneliness fought harder. Then she nodded once. Yes. Ethan explained each step. He moved with care, not speed. He gave her time to breathe. When she finally settled on the couch, her shoulders slumped like she'd been carrying something heavier than paralysis. She stared at the candle flame, voice barely there. Thank you. Ethan paused, surprised by the words. You're welcome, he said quietly. The generator finally hummed more strongly, and lights flickered back on in the far hallway. Not full power. It isn't enough to make the mansion feel alive again. Victoria didn't celebrate. She just sat there, wrapped in a blanket Ethan had draped over her without asking first, then quickly apologized when she noticed. She didn't scold him. She pulled the blanket tighter instead. And somewhere in that fragile quiet, something shifted. Not a miracle. Not a full transformation. Just a crack. A crack where trust could enter. The morning after the storm, the mansion felt different. Not warmer, not brighter. Just aware. Victoria noticed it before she admitted it. The curtains were still half open from the night before. The candle wax had hardened in small pools across the coffee table. The dead wheelchair sat charging beside the wall, like a reminder of how close she had come to losing control. Ethan arrived at 8 a.m. Sharp. He didn't mention the storm first. He didn't mention the fear. He just said, "Good morning." Victoria studied him as he set down his bag. "You didn't leave?" she said. Then he paused. "No, you could have. Power outage. Safety hazard. You needed me." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." That unsettled her more than if he had argued. He approached slowly. "Battery's charged. I'm going to reconnect it. Is that okay?" She nodded once. He moved carefully, narrating each motion like always. The routine felt steadier now, not mechanical, but respectful. After reconnecting the chair, he stepped back instead of hovering. As Victoria tested the controls, the hum returned, reliable, obedient. Her fingers rested on the armrest. "You said something last night." "I say a lot of things." "You said I push people away before they leave." Ethan didn't rush to defend the statement. "Yes." Her eyes sharpened. "That's arrogant." "Maybe." And wrong. "Maybe." The non-defensive answer frustrated her more than confrontation would have. "You think you understand me after 1 week?" "No," Ethan replied. "Oui, I think I understand fear." She stared at him. "Fear of losing control," he continued. "Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of someone leaving after you let them close." Her lips pressed together. "You don't get to analyze me," she said quietly. "You're right," he said. "I don't." That response disarmed her again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria surprised herself. There was a board meeting scheduled today. Ethan waited. "I canceled it," she said. Again. He didn't react with praise or disappointment. "Do you want to reschedule it?" he asked. Her eyes flicked up. "I can't walk into that room like this." "Like what?" She gestured sharply toward her chair. "Like a liability." Ethan took a breath. "You're not a liability." "I can't stand." "That doesn't mean you can't lead." Her voice rose slightly. "You think investors don't see this?" She tapped the armrest. "You think they don't whisper about risk?" Ethan held her gaze. You built your empire negotiating risk." "That was before." "Before what?" "Before I lost everything." Silence fell heavy again. Ethan stepped closer, but not too close. "You lost mobility," he said carefully. You didn't lose your mind. You didn't lose your experience. You didn't lose your voice. Victoria's face hardened. You don't understand what it's like to be reduced. Ethan's jaw tightened briefly. You're right. I don't understand paralysis. He hesitated. But I understand being invisible. That made her pause. He continued quietly. I deliver packages to offices I'll never sit in. I hand food to people who don't look at my face. I've worked jobs where I wasn't worth remembering. Victoria studied him with new intensity. That's not the same, she said. No, Ethan agreed. It's not. But it's still losing something. The words hung between them. Later that afternoon, during a routine transfer from wheelchair to therapy chair, Victoria's hand slipped, her body tilted. For one split second, real panic flashed across her face. Ethan reacted instantly, but not violently, not grabbing without warning. I've got you, he said firmly. He stabilized her carefully, adjusting her balance before she fully lost it. Her breathing was shallow. I told you not to drop me, she whispered, anger masking the tremor in her voice. And I didn't. She closed her eyes tightly. For the first time since he started, she didn't push him away after a vulnerable moment. Instead, she asked, barely audible, what if this is it? What if this is all I ever am now? Ethan stayed kneeling at eye level. You're more than what your body can do, he said. That's something able-bodied people say, she shot back. Okay, he conceded. Then let me say this instead. She waited. You're still the woman who made half this city listen. Her eyes flickered. And if they stop listening, he added, that says more about them than it does about you. She looked away, but she didn't argue. That evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table in his apartment while Lily flipped through a textbook. You're quiet, she said. Just thinking. About her? Ethan exhaled slowly. She's not as cruel as people say. Is that supposed to be comforting? She's scared. Lily closed her book. And you're not? Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. I don't have time to be. The next morning, Miss Victoria surprised him again. There's a summit, she said without greeting. Ethan set down the medication tray. What kind? Pacific Urban Innovation Forum, 300 developers, investors, media. And they invited me to speak. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Are you going? She scoffed. Why would I? Because they invited you. Her gaze sharpened. You think that's enough? I think you haven't said no yet. Victoria turned her chair slightly, staring out the window. What if they only invited me out of pity? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then go and make them regret underestimating you, he said finally. She stared at him. You don't know what you're asking. I'm not asking, he replied. I'm reminding. Of what? Of who you were. Her voice dropped. I don't know who that is anymore. Ethan took a careful step forward. Then maybe it's time to figure out who you are now. That struck deeper than she expected. Because for weeks, she had been fighting to become who she used to be. She hadn't considered becoming something else. That afternoon, during physical therapy, frustration returned like a familiar enemy. Victoria struggled to hold her balance in the assisted frame. Sweat gathered at her temples. Her arms trembled. This is pointless, she snapped. It's progress, Ethan corrected gently. Don't patronize me. I'm not. Her temper flared fast. Like, you think standing here for 30 seconds is an accomplishment? For someone who couldn't do it for 10 last week? Yes. She shoved the therapy bar. It rattled loudly. You're here for the paycheck, she accused suddenly. Don't pretend it's anything else. The words hit harder than she knew. Ethan stepped back slowly. If that were true, he said quietly, I would have left on day 3. She opened her mouth, but no words came. He picked up his bag. I'll be back tomorrow. And he walked out. Victoria stared at the empty doorway. The silence felt heavier this time, because this time, she wasn't sure he would return. Victoria did not move for several minutes after the door closed. The mansion seemed louder in his absence. The clock ticked too sharply. The refrigerator hummed like it was mocking her. You're here for the paycheck. The words replayed in her head. She had meant them to cut. She had meant them to protect herself. Instead, they echoed. He would leave now. Of course, he would. That was how this worked. She pushed. They left. She told herself she preferred it that way. But this time, something inside her twisted. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual, earlier than she would admit. She told herself it was routine. She told herself it didn't matter whether he came back. At 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Victoria's heart reacted before her pride could stop it. The house manager opened the door. Ethan stepped inside as if nothing had happened. In no dramatic entrance, no wounded speech, no accusation. "Good morning," he said. Victoria held his gaze for a long moment. "You came back." "Yes," she swallowed. "Why?" "Because you're not wrong," he replied calmly. "I do need the paycheck." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "But that's not the only reason." Silence hovered. "I won't pretend your words didn't sting," he continued. "But I understand why you said them." Her jaw tightened. "You're used to people wanting something from you," he said. "You money, status, access." "And you don't?" she challenged. "I want stability for my family," he answered honestly. "But I don't want to use you to get it." She studied him carefully. That steadiness again. That refusal to turn it into a battle. He set his bag down. "We have therapy at 10. Her voice was softer this time. "I was cruel." Ethan didn't flinch. "You were scared." "I don't need you translating my emotions," she snapped automatically. "I know." A pause. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Ethan nodded once. "Thank you." No celebration, no smugness, just acceptance. During therapy that morning, something shifted. Victoria stood in the assisted frame again. Her arms trembled, but she didn't lash out. 30 seconds. 40. "Stop counting," she muttered. "I'm not," Ethan said. She was. At 50 seconds, her arms gave slightly. "Okay," he said calmly. "We sit." She lowered herself with his guidance, breathing heavy. "I hate that I have to fight for things that used to be automatic," she said between breaths. Ethan crouched nearby. "You're not fighting for the same things." "What does that even mean?" "It means before, you fought for dominance. Now, you're fighting for recovery." She stared at him. "That's not weakness," he added. "That's adaptation." She looked away, but she didn't dismiss the thought. 2 days later, Victoria sat in her office staring at the invitation to the Pacific Urban Innovation Forum. Yet the words blurred slightly. Keynote speaker. She hadn't accepted. She hadn't declined. She had stalled. Ethan entered with her afternoon medication. "You've been looking at that email for 20 minutes, he observed. "I'm evaluating." "You're avoiding." She shot him a look. He didn't retreat. "What are you afraid of?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Then she answered honestly, "That they'll see me as broken." Ethan leaned against the bookshelf, arms folded loosely. "Nice, and if they do?" Her voice was sharp. "Then I confirm their doubts." "Or," he countered, "you redefine them." She exhaled slowly. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said. "It's terrifying." That earned him a faint, almost invisible smile. "Why are you pushing this?" she asked. "I'm not pushing," he replied. "I'm asking." "Why?" "Because disappearing won't make you feel safer." Her gaze sharpened. "You don't want to be reduced to this house," he continued quietly. You don't want your story to end here." Silence. The truth landed heavier than criticism ever had. That evening, she accepted the invitation. The next few days were tense. Victoria practiced her speech in fragments. Sometimes she stopped halfway through. Sometimes she crumpled the paper. "I sound like I'm begging for sympathy," she snapped once. "You sound human," Ethan corrected. "I built my empire on control," she said. "And now?" he asked. She didn't answer. The night before the summit, an anxiety crept in like fog. Victoria sat in the living room, staring at her reflection in the dark window. "I can't do this," she said abruptly. Ethan looked up from across the room. "You can." "No," she whispered. "You don't understand. If I falter, they'll never take me seriously again." He stood and walked toward her slowly. "You're not going there to prove you're unchanged," he said. "You're going there to show you've evolved." She looked up at him. "What if they don't clap?" she asked, that vulnerability cracking through again. "Then you leave knowing you didn't hide." The morning of the summit arrived faster than she was ready for. The venue buzzed with quiet authority. Suits, cameras, low conversation. When Victoria rolled through the entrance, heads turned, whispers followed. She felt every one of them. Ethan walked slightly behind her, not leading, not shielding, just present. "You ready?" he asked softly. "No," she answered honestly. "Good," he said. That means it matters." They reached backstage. Her name was announced. Applause, polite but cautious, filled the hall. Victoria wheeled onto the stage. The lights were bright. The audience was large. For one terrifying second, she wanted to reverse out of the room. Instead, she adjusted the microphone. "I wasn't sure I'd ever speak publicly again," she began. The room quieted. She spoke about the accident, about loss, about rage. She did not beg. She did not perform well. She told the truth. "Well, I thought losing my legs meant losing my power," she said, voice steady. "I was wrong." The audience leaned in. "Strength isn't standing alone," she continued. "It's learning how to stand differently." She did not mention Ethan immediately, but when she did, it was simple. "I had someone remind me that adaptation is not surrender." She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. The applause this time was louder, genuine. When she left the stage, her hands trembled, but not from fear. And Ethan met her backstage. "You didn't hide," he said. She exhaled slowly. "No," she said, "I didn't." And for the first time since the accident, she didn't feel reduced. She felt reclaimed. The applause didn't fade from Victoria's ears, even after they were back in the car. It wasn't the sound that lingered. It was the absence of pity. No one had leaned forward with sympathy in their eyes. No one had treated her like a fragile headline. They had listened. That mattered more than she expected. And Ethan drove quietly through downtown Seattle. The skyline reflected off the windshield like a memory she hadn't fully lost. "You're quiet," he said finally. Victoria stared out the window. "I'm thinking." "That's dangerous." A faint breath of a laugh escaped her. "I forgot what it feels like to be heard." "You weren't forgotten," he replied. She looked at him sharply. "That's not true. Investors moved on, projects stalled, competitors circled. And yet," he said calmly, "that they invited you." She leaned back in her seat, processing that. Back at Silvercrest Heights, something felt different, not just inside her, inside the house. The awards no longer looked like accusations. The framed magazine covers didn't feel like relics of a dead life. They felt like chapters. Victoria wheeled herself into her office without prompting. Ethan noticed. "You don't need anything?" he asked lightly. "I need silence," she replied. But it wasn't isolation she was seeking. It was direction. An hour later, she called him in. "I've been thinking," she said, hands folded on her desk. "There are people who can't afford this kind of care." Ethan waited. "I built luxury spaces for decades," she continued, "but I ignored accessibility unless it was legally required." "That's not unusual," he said carefully. "It should be," she snapped, then softened. "I want to start something." "Like what?" "A foundation, adaptive equipment grants, therapy funding, mobility scholarships." Ethan blinked once. "That's ambitious." She met his gaze. "So was my first development project." He didn't smile. He respected it. "You'll need someone to handle community outreach," he said thoughtfully. She studied him. "Yes," she said slowly. "I will." Days passed quickly after that. Victoria re-entered conversations she had avoided. She called former colleagues. She set meetings. Not everyone responded warmly. Some were cautious. Some were skeptical. But she didn't retreat. And for the first time, when doubt crept in, she didn't lash out at Ethan. Instead, she asked questions. "How do I make this real?" she said one afternoon. "You start small," he replied. "Local clinics, partner programs." "You've thought about this." "I've lived it," he said quietly. That caught her attention. "You mean your mother?" He nodded. "She waited months for a therapy slot once," he added. "It's because we couldn't afford private care." Victoria's jaw tightened slightly. "And you never told me," she said. "You never asked." The words weren't accusatory. They were factual. Something about that unsettled her. Not guilt, but awareness. The foundation launch moved faster than either of them anticipated. Press releases went out. Partnerships were formed, interviews were requested. One afternoon, Victoria sat in the living room reviewing a draft announcement. Ethan stood nearby, watching her adjust the wording. "You removed the line about overcoming adversity," he noted. "I don't want it to sound like inspiration bait," she replied sharply. "This isn't about making people feel good, it's about access." He nodded. That was new. Weeks ago, she would have framed it as a comeback story. Now, it was infrastructure. On the morning of the official announcement, reporters gathered in the mansion's foyer. Victoria rolled forward confidently. This time, she didn't feel exposed, yet she felt intentional. "We're launching the Adrian Cole Mobility Trust," she said clearly. "Not as charity, but as equity." Flashes popped, questions followed. "Is this a response to your accident?" "It's a response to a gap," she corrected. Afterward, as reporters dispersed, she turned toward Ethan. "You're going to run community engagement." He blinked. "That wasn't a suggestion," she added. Ethan stared at her. "You have lived experience," she continued. "You understand dignity. That you understand frustration. You don't treat people like projects." He swallowed slowly. "I'm a delivery driver," he said. "You're more than that," she replied. He hesitated. "What about your mother?" she asked gently. "She'll be okay." "Medical bills?" she pressed. Ethan stiffened slightly. "I'm not taking charity." Victoria's gaze sharpened. "Good." She reached for a folder and slid it across the desk. "It's a contract," she said. "Salary, benefits, full authority over outreach strategy." He didn't open it immediately. "You earned it," she said quietly. The words carried weight. Ethan finally looked down at the paper. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from possibility. Later that evening, he sat at his apartment table with Lily and their mother. "You're serious?" Lily whispered. He nodded. His mother looked at him with tired but proud eyes. "You stayed?" she said. He swallowed hard. "Yes." Back at Silvercrest Heights, Victoria stood in her therapy frame again. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Her arms trembled, her legs strained. Ethan stood nearby, but not touching her. "Don't let me fall," she said quietly. He met her gaze. "I won't," he replied. But he didn't reach unless she asked, and that was the difference. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed something rare. Not a miracle, not a cure, but transformation built slowly, stubbornly, through persistence. Drop a comment below. Do you believe true power comes from control or from adaptation? Because Victoria and Ethan discovered something bigger than either of them expected. And maybe you just did too. The mansion no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a headquarters. Victoria adjusted her grip on the therapy bar. 30 seconds, 40, 50. This time, she wasn't counting. She was building. And Ethan didn't stand in front of her. He stood beside her, where he belonged. The first grant request came in at 6:12 a.m. Victoria was already awake. She hadn't slept much since the announcement, not from anxiety this time, but from momentum. She rolled herself into her office before the house manager even started the coffee. Ethan arrived 15 minutes later and found her staring at a laptop screen. "You're up early," he said. "I remember how this works," she replied. "Momentum is everything." He stepped closer. "What's the request?" She turned the screen toward him. Single mother, 2 kids, spinal cord injury from a construction accident, insurance denial, needs an adaptive wheelchair and home modifications. Victoria didn't blink. "How much?" she asked. Ethan scanned. 48,000. She leaned back slightly. "That's one person," she said. "Yes." "And there are thousands like her." "Yes." Victoria closed the laptop slowly. "This is bigger than I thought." Ethan watched her carefully. "That scares you?" "No," she said quietly. It clarifies things. The next few weeks were intense. Applications flooded in. Emails poured. Calls came at all hours. Victoria didn't retreat. She leaned in. Meetings multiplied. Partnerships formed. Clinics agreed to reduced rates. Contractors volunteered their time. Ethan moved constantly between offices, community centers, and small homes across the city. He saw things he had lived before, but now he had resources to respond. One afternoon, he returned from a site visit visibly shaken. Victoria noticed immediately. What happened? He hesitated. A teenage girl, he said finally. 17, wheelchair broken for 3 months. She's been crawling around her house because her parents can't afford repairs. Victoria's fingers tightened on her desk. How much to fix it? $800. She stared at him. 800, she repeated. He nodded. That's what kept her trapped. Silence thickened the air. Victoria inhaled slowly. Approve it, she said. It's already done, Ethan replied. She looked up at him sharply. You move fast, she observed. You told me to. A small nod. That was the point. But not everything moved smoothly. Critics emerged. Opinion pieces questioned her motives. Image rehabilitation, one headline read. Billionaire guilt project, another declared. Victoria read everyone. She didn't lash out, but she felt it. Ethan noticed the tension building again. You can't control the narrative, he reminded her gently. Or at least I used to, she said. And now? She looked at him steadily. Now, I control impact. That answer satisfied even her. One evening, as they reviewed the Foundation's monthly reports, Victoria's voice dropped unexpectedly. Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Staying. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Some days, he admitted, she didn't look offended. Why? Because it would have been easier to deliver packages and go home, he said honestly. It's easier to keep my world small. And now? Now it's bigger. That's heavier. Victoria studied him with a softer gaze. I never meant to make your life heavier, she said. You didn't, he replied. You made it matter more. The words landed quietly but firmly. A few days later, Victoria received an invitation she hadn't expected. A national mobility advocacy panel in Washington, D.C. She read it twice. Then she closed her laptop and wheeled into the main hallway. Yet Ethan was reviewing outreach numbers with a volunteer. We've been invited to D.C., she announced calmly. The volunteer gasped slightly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. We? She held his gaze. You're coming. He didn't argue. The trip felt different from the summit. This wasn't about reclaiming identity. This was about defining one. In D.C., Victoria sat on stage alongside policymakers and medical leaders. She didn't present herself as an inspirational symbol. She presented data, access gaps, insurance failures, cost comparisons. The room listened. Afterward, a young man in a wheelchair approached her. You said something important, he said. You said independence isn't the absence of help. It's the right kind of help. Victoria glanced briefly at Ethan before answering. Yes, she said. That's exactly what it is. Back in Seattle, Silvercrest Heights didn't feel intimidating anymore. It felt like ground zero for something expanding. One afternoon, during therapy, Victoria surprised even herself. I don't want to just stand, she said suddenly. Ethan adjusted the frame slightly. Okay? I want to try stepping. He froze for half a second. That's ambitious. So was this foundation, she shot back. He didn't smile. He adjusted carefully. Tell me every move, she said. I will. Her foot shifted. Barely. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't dramatic. But it moved. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Again, she whispered. Whereas Ethan's voice stayed steady. Again. Later that night, alone in her office, Victoria stared at a framed photo of herself before the accident. Confident, unbreakable. She didn't feel broken anymore. She felt rebuilt. Not the same. Stronger in different ways. The next morning, she called Ethan into her office once more. You were right, she said. He blinked. About what? Leaving is easier. And staying? Build something. He nodded once. I want you to understand something, she continued. And that's this foundation, this expansion, none of it works without someone who understands both sides. Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? You've been on the receiving end of systems that fail, she said, and now you're inside one that can fix them. He absorbed that slowly. That's responsibility, he said. Yes, she agreed. It is. It's a legacy, and legacies don't end quietly. Victoria adjusted her therapy frame again that afternoon. This time, when she shifted her weight, she didn't whisper, "Don't let me fall." She simply moved, and Ethan stood close enough to catch her. but far enough to let her try. That was the balance they had built, not dependency, not distance, partnership. And this time, when the mansion fell silent at night, it didn't feel empty. It felt ready. 3 months after the foundation's launch, the first real crisis hit. Not financial, not medical, reputation. It's an investigative blog published an article accusing the Adrian Cole Mobility Trust of favoritism. The headline was sharp enough to draw blood. Billionaire Foundation funds, friends first. Victoria read it twice before closing the laptop slowly. Ethan stood across from her desk, jaw tight. "That's not true," he said. "I know," she replied calmly. The article cited one approved grant recipient who happened to live in the same district as one of Victoria's former investors. It implied insider influence. It didn't matter that the application had been processed blindly through review criteria. It didn't matter that Ethan had personally overseen the file. Public doubt didn't require facts. It required suspicion. "Do we respond?" Ethan asked. Victoria leaned back in her chair, eyes steady. "If we defend ourselves aggressively, it looks guilty," she said. "And if we stay silent, it looks arrogant." Ethan exhaled slowly. You built your empire navigating storms," he said quietly. "This is just another one." She looked at him sharply. "It's not the same," she said. "Before, if a competitor attacked me, I could outmaneuver them. I had leverage. And now I have credibility. And transparency," Ethan added. She nodded once. "Prepare a public breakdown of the selection process," she said. "Full criteria, review board names, anonymous scoring sheets." "You're going to expose everything?" he asked. "Yes," she said evenly. "If we claim equity, we prove it." The response video went live 2 days later. Victoria didn't speak emotionally. She spoke precisely. She detailed the review process. She acknowledged public concern. She invited independent auditing. Ethan stood beside her during the recording, not as support staff, but as director of outreach. When the video ended, she turned to him. "No hiding," she said. "No hiding," he echoed. The backlash softened, not instantly, but steadily. Its transparency did what outrage couldn't. That night, as Victoria reviewed updated metrics, she glanced toward Ethan. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. He looked up from his tablet. "When?" "Any time the pressure increased." He gave a small shrug. "So could you." She almost smiled. "Fair." The foundation continued growing, but success brought scale. Scale brought strain. Ethan began coming home later. Lily noticed first. "You're exhausted," she said one night as he sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. "I'm fine." "That's what you say before you crash." He rubbed his face with both hands. "It's just a lot." "You don't have to save everyone," she said gently. He let out a slow breath. "I know." But knowing and feeling were different things. The next week, Victoria noticed something in him. He hesitated before answering emails. He stared at spreadsheets longer than usual. "You're tired," she observed bluntly. "I'm okay." "That wasn't what I said." He met her gaze. She didn't look accusatory. She looked aware. "I pushed hard," she admitted. "This expansion, it accelerated quickly." Ethan nodded slightly. "I don't regret it," he said, "but it's heavy." Victoria wheeled closer. "When I built my first skyscraper," she said quietly, "I slept in my office for 2 weeks." "That sounds unhealthy," he replied. "It was," she said, and it almost cost me everything." He blinked. "You think I don't recognize burnout?" she asked. Silence. "You're not invincible," she continued. "Neither am I." He leaned back in his chair slowly. "I don't want to fail you," he admitted. The honesty surprised even him. Victoria's expression shifted. "You're not here to serve me," she said firmly. "You're here to build something with me." He nodded once. "Then act like a leader," she added. "Delegate, build teams, trust people." He exhaled. That's harder than staying late." "I know," she said. For the first time, their dynamic tilted again. Not caregiver and patient, not employer and employee. Two leaders are learning. Weeks later, another milestone arrived. The foundation funded its 100th grant. Victoria insisted on attending the handover personally. It was a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. A father in his 40s waited outside nervously. When Victoria rolled forward, he froze. You don't have to be here, he said awkwardly. Yes, she replied gently. I do. Inside, his daughter, 8 years old, sat on the floor with a temporary brace on her leg. When the adaptive equipment was delivered, the room went quiet. Victoria watched as the child tested it hesitantly, then smiled. A real, unfiltered smile. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. She glanced at Ethan. He was watching the girl, not the cameras, not the paperwork, just her. On the drive back, Victoria didn't speak for several minutes. Finally, she said, "That's the point." Ethan nodded. "That's always been the point." Later that evening, during therapy, Victoria stood again in the assisted frame. She shifted her weight, one foot, then the other. The motion was subtle, but deliberate. Ethan stood close, not touching. She moved again. And for the first time, she didn't need to ask him to stay near. She trusted he would. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken this job?" she asked quietly. Ethan considered it. "I'd still be delivering groceries," he said. "Still paying bills, still surviving. And now? Now I'm building." She absorbed that. "You rebuilt me," she said softly. He shook his head. "No," he replied. "You let yourself rebuild." She didn't argue, because this time she knew he was right. Because strength doesn't vanish when life changes. It changes shape. And sometimes, that shape is stronger than before. Victoria adjusted her stance one last time that night. Her legs trembled, but they held. Ethan didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. She wasn't standing alone. She was standing differently. And that was enough. The first time Victoria stood without the assistive frame, it lasted 4 seconds. 4 fragile, shaking seconds. Ethan didn't move when she did it. He didn't even realize she was about to try. She had positioned herself near the therapy rail, hands resting lightly against it, eyes narrowed in focus. "I'm going to try something," she said quietly. Ethan instinctively stepped forward. "Don't," she warned. He froze. "I need to know what it feels like," she continued, "without structure." Her arms tightened, her jaw locked, her body shifted, slowly, painfully. Her legs straightened, not fully, not gracefully, but enough. 4 seconds. Then she lowered herself carefully back into the chair. The room was silent. Her breathing was uneven. But her eyes were steady. "You saw that," she said. "Yes." "I didn't fall." "No." A small, almost disbelieving laugh escaped her. "I didn't fall." For someone who had once negotiated multi-million-dollar projects without blinking, those 4 seconds carried more weight than any contract she had ever signed. But growth doesn't move in straight lines. 2 days later, she tried again, and failed. Her balance slipped faster this time. Her leg buckled unexpectedly. Ethan moved instinctively, always catching her before impact. Her frustration ignited immediately. "Let go," she snapped. "I can't," he replied calmly. "Not yet." She shoved against his shoulder weakly. "I had it." "You almost did." "Almost isn't enough." Her voice rose sharply, echoing off the walls. Ethan lowered her gently into the chair. "It's still progress," he said. "I don't want progress," she shot back. "I want control." The word hung there again. Control, the old currency of her identity. Ethan stepped back slowly. You're not fighting the same battle anymore," he said quietly. She glared at him. "Then what am I fighting?" He held her gaze. Acceptance. Her anger didn't explode this time. It simmered. That evening, she sat alone longer than usual. The mansion was quiet, not oppressive, just reflective. She thought about control, about how tightly she had gripped it before the accident, about how violently it had been taken, and how desperately she had tried to rebuild it in the same shape. Maybe that was the mistake. The next morning, she called Ethan into her office. "I want to expand the foundation's focus," she said, without preamble. He raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "Yes." "Into what?" "Employment reintegration programs," she replied. "People lose more than mobility after injury. They lose careers, purpose, identity." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "That's complicated." "So was real estate development," she countered. He didn't smile this time. He understood what this meant. "You're not just helping people move again," he said slowly. "You're helping them rebuild who they are." "Yes." The word was firm. "And you're going to lead that expansion," she added. He blinked. "Me?" "You understand that loss," she said. "You understand rebuilding without recognition." He swallowed. "That's not something I studied," he said carefully. "It's something you lived," she replied. The weight of that responsibility settled between them. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt aligned. Months passed. The foundation grew. Grants increased. Programs expanded. Media coverage shifted tone, from skepticism to acknowledgement. But personal transformation moves more slowly than public perception. One afternoon, Victoria received a letter, handwritten, from the teenage girl whose wheelchair had been repaired months earlier. "Because of you, I went back to school." Victoria read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, not as a trophy, when as a reminder. Later that day, Ethan noticed her unusually quiet. "Bad news?" he asked. She shook her head. "Good," she said softly. He waited. "I used to measure success in square footage," she continued. "Now I measure it in letters like that." He nodded slowly. "Which one feels heavier?" he asked. She considered that carefully. "The second," she admitted, "not because it weighed more, because it meant more." That evening, during therapy, she stood again. This time, not chasing 4 seconds. Not chasing perfection, just presence. Her legs trembled. Her breath steadied. Ethan stood nearby, but not hovering. She shifted her weight, 1 foot forward. It landed, small but deliberate. "Again," she said. He nodded, not instructing, not correcting, just witnessing. Outside, Seattle rain tapped lightly against the windows. Inside, something steadier was being built. Later that week, Victoria invited Ethan to join her at a university panel on leadership and resilience. You don't need me there," he said. "Yes, I do," she replied. He frowned slightly. "You think this was a solo recovery?" she asked. He didn't answer. At the panel, a student asked a question that caught both of them off guard. "What was the hardest part of your recovery?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Ethan briefly. Then she said, "Letting someone see me afraid." The room quieted. "And the second hardest?" The student pressed. She inhaled slowly. "Or trusting that they wouldn't leave." Ethan felt that one, not as praise, as acknowledgement. After the panel, as they walked toward the car, Victoria said quietly, "You stayed." "Yes." "You could have chosen easier." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" He looked ahead, hands in his coat pockets. "Because leaving doesn't build anything." She smiled faintly. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." That night, back at Silvercrest Heights, she stood again in the therapy frame. No announcement, no ceremony. Just repetition. And this time, when she shifted her weight forward, she didn't think about control. She thought about balance. It felt different, less rigid, more sustainable. Ethan watched without stepping in. Because now he understood something too. He wasn't there to hold her up. He was there to stand beside her. Because the strongest part of her story wasn't standing. It was learning how to stand differently. And that lesson didn't just change her. It changed him too. That winter came quietly to Seattle. Silvercrest Heights turned gray and sharp, the air thinner, the mornings colder. Victoria didn't mind the cold anymore. It reminded her that sensation still existed, that she still existed. But pressure was building again. The Adrian Cole Mobility Trust had grown faster than projected. National recognition meant national expectations. Requests now came from outside Washington. Emails arrived from states she had never developed in. As expansion, one board member said over video call, means risk. Victoria didn't flinch. "Risk is manageable," she replied. "Stagnation isn't." After the call ended, she sat still for a moment. Ethan stepped into the office quietly. "You're pushing hard," he said. "I have to," she replied. "Do you?" She looked up sharply. "Growth doesn't have to mean acceleration," he continued. "It can mean stabilization." She studied him carefully. "You sound like you're advising me," she said. "Nay, I am." She leaned back slightly. 3 months ago, she said slowly, "you would have waited for me to ask. 3 months ago, he replied calmly. I was still adjusting. She didn't smile, but something in her expression shifted. That was good, thus too. 2 days later, another challenge surfaced. An internal report revealed a processing backlog. Applications were piling faster than the review team could handle. Families were waiting longer than promised. Victoria read the report twice. We promised 4-week decisions, she said quietly. We're averaging 7 now, Ethan replied. That's unacceptable. It's reality. Her jaw tightened. I won't become the system I hated, she said firmly. Then we adjust, Ethan said. She turned her chair slightly. How? Hire regionally, he answered. Train community partners to pre-screen. Decentralize. Her eyes sharpened. You've thought this through. I've seen what bottlenecks do. She nodded slowly. I implement it. There was no ego in that exchange anymore. No need to dominate the room. They were building something larger than either of them now. That evening, Victoria's therapy session didn't go well. Her legs felt heavier. Her balance slipped twice. Frustration returned, but this time it didn't explode. It simmered. I hate that progress isn't linear, she muttered. Ethan adjusted the rail slightly. Neither is leadership, he said. She shot him a look. You think this is comparable? Yes, he replied evenly. Some days you expand, some days you stabilize. She exhaled slowly. You're quoting yourself now. Maybe. For a brief second, her old sharpness flickered, but without venom. I miss walking without thinking, she admitted. I know. I miss not calculating every move. I know. Silence settled. Then she surprised him again. I don't miss who I was, she said. He looked up. Before, she continued, I measured power in control, all in dominance, in being untouchable. And now, he asked, now I measure it in reach. The word landed between them. Reach. The ability to affect beyond yourself. Later that week, Ethan's mother was hospitalized unexpectedly. Complications. Ethan received the call mid-meeting. His composure fractured just enough for Victoria to notice. Go, she said immediately. I can handle this remotely, he replied automatically. That wasn't a suggestion, she said firmly. He hesitated. No, you taught me something, she continued. Staying matters. He swallowed. Yes. Right now, she needs you to stay. He nodded once and left. At the hospital, Ethan sat beside his mother's bed through the night. Machines hummed softly. She opened her eyes briefly. You look tired, she whispered. I'm fine. She smiled faintly. You always say that. He squeezed her hand gently. Don't carry everything alone, she murmured before drifting back to sleep. The words echoed in his mind. Back at Silvercrest Heights, Victoria reviewed foundation numbers alone. For the first time in months, she felt the absence. Not dependency, not fear, but recognition. He had become integral, not as support, as a structure. 2 days later, Ethan returned. Tired, eyes shadowed, but steady. How is she? Victoria asked. Stable, he said. For now. She nodded. You're not working today, she added. He blinked. I am. No, she said calmly. You're resting. He opened his mouth to argue. She raised an eyebrow. You told me once I wasn't invincible, she said. Neither are you. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. That was a partnership too. Weeks passed. The Foundation's regional model began working. Backlogs decreased. Processing times improved. One afternoon, Victoria stood in the therapy frame and didn't tremble. Not because it was easy, because her balance had improved. She shifted forward, one step, then another. Ethan stood close, but didn't touch. You're not reaching for me, she observed. You're not asking, he replied. She exhaled slowly. I'm not afraid, she said quietly. He held her gaze. I know. Later that evening, she wheeled into the living room, where the porcelain fireplace still bore faint marks from the shattered teacup months ago. She traced her finger over the surface lightly. 23, she murmured. Ethan looked up from across the room. Caregivers, she clarified. You drove them away, he said. Oh, yes. And I don't regret it, she replied. He frowned slightly. Because I wasn't ready then, she continued. I would have destroyed anyone who tried to stay. He absorbed that slowly. You didn't destroy me, he said. No, she agreed. You refused to leave. The air between them felt different now, not heavy, grounded. If you ever decide to, she added quietly, I won't push you first. He studied her. That's progress, he said. Yes, she replied. It was. Victoria moved back toward the therapy frame, not because she had to, because she wanted to. She placed her hands lightly, shifted forward, stood. And this time, when she balanced on her own for nearly 10 seconds, she didn't look for Ethan. She looked ahead, and he watched, not to catch her, but to witness her becoming something new. Spring returned slowly. Seattle thawed from its gray winter, and so did Silvercrest Heights. The Adrian Cole Mobility Trust had now expanded into 3 states, and regional partners were operating independently. Application timelines were back within promise. The National Advisory Board had grown from 5 to 12 members. But success brought a new question: sustainability. Victoria sat at the head of the conference table during a quarterly review meeting. Investors, advisors, and medical consultants filled the room. One board member cleared his throat. We need to discuss scalability, he said. If this grows any larger, it won't just be a foundation. It becomes an institution. Victoria didn't look intimidated. That's the goal, she replied. Yes, he said carefully, but institutions require structure beyond personality. The implication wasn't subtle. Ethan watched her closely. Victoria's eyes narrowed just slightly. You think this relies too much on me, she said. I think, the board member replied, it currently does. Silence settled. Old instincts flickered. Control, dominance, assertion. But something had changed. Victoria leaned back instead of forward. Then we build structure, she said evenly. No defensiveness, no sharpness, just direction. After the meeting, Ethan stepped into her office. That was different, he said. From what? From how you would have responded a year ago. She gave him a long look. A year ago, I would have seen that as a threat. And now? Now I see it as continuity. He nodded slowly. That's leadership, he said. No, she replied. That's learning. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived, not from a grant recipient, from the family of Adrian Cole, Victoria's late fiancé. She stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Ethan stood nearby but didn't ask. Inside was a handwritten note. They had been watching the foundation quietly. They had seen the impact. They wanted to contribute, financially and publicly. Victoria folded the letter carefully. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. You okay? Ethan asked gently. She nodded once. They're proud, she said softly. Of her, not of the empire, not of the skyline, of this. The next therapy session carried new energy. Victoria adjusted her stance in the frame, shifted weight, 1 step, 2. Her muscles trembled, but steadier now. She wasn't chasing walking anymore. She was chasing strength. I want to try the parallel bars, she said suddenly. Ethan blinked. That's a bigger jump. So was standing without the frame. He stepped aside. She gripped the bars carefully, moved. Nay, it wasn't graceful, but it was real. The distance was small, but intentional. When she sat back down, her eyes were bright. I felt that, she said. Yes, he replied. Not fear. He nodded. That's new. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment. His mother was home from the hospital and stable. Lily had secured a scholarship through a foundation partner. His phone buzzed. An email from a nonprofit in Chicago requesting consultation. He stared at the message. Opportunity, expansion, and distance. He didn't answer immediately. The next morning he mentioned it to Victoria. A national advisory position? She asked. Yes. She didn't react emotionally. That's significant, she said calmly. It would mean travel, extended periods away. Silence. She studied him carefully. Do you want it? She asked. I don't know, he admitted. Why? He hesitated. Because this matters. She nodded once. And so does your growth. He looked at her. You're not upset. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Should I be? "No," he said quickly. "You're not mine," she interrupted gently. The words landed without sharpness. "You stayed when I needed you," she continued. "Not because you were trapped, because you chose to." He absorbed that. "And if you choose something else," she added, "I won't push you first." A small smile touched his face. "That's growth," he said. "Yes," she replied. It was. That afternoon, during a live-streamed Foundation town hall, a question came from a young man in Texas. "Do you ever wish none of this happened?" The room went quiet. Victoria didn't rush. "Yes," she said honestly. "There are days I would trade every achievement for one ordinary walk." The audience leaned in. "But," she continued, "if it hadn't happened, I would still measure power incorrectly." Silence deepened. "I would still think control equals strength," she added. "I would still ignore accessibility. Oh, I would still mistake independence for isolation." Her gaze steadied. "This changed my body. It changed my trajectory. But it didn't end my story." Ethan watched from the side, not as a protector, not as a caretaker, as a witness. Later that night, she stood again between the parallel bars. No announcement, no pressure, just repetition. Her legs trembled, her breath stayed steady. One step, then another. She didn't look at Ethan. She didn't ask him to count. She simply moved. And this time, she didn't think about falling. She thought about the future. Victoria released the bars carefully and lowered herself into the chair. She looked up at Ethan. "You're going to take that advisory position," she said calmly. He hesitated. "Yes." She nodded. "Good." He studied her. "You're not afraid?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Because this time, she knew something she hadn't known before. Staying builds, but so does letting go. And neither meant losing strength. They meant choosing it, together, differently. And that was enough. Ethan didn't accept the advisory position immediately. He let the email sit in his inbox for 3 days. On the 4th day, he printed it. On the 5th, he brought it to Silvercrest Heights. Victoria was reviewing a new partnership proposal when he entered. "You decided?" she asked without looking up. He placed the printed offer on her desk. "Yes." She glanced at it briefly, then back at him. "You're leaving." "Partially," he corrected. "It's rotational, consulting, development frameworks, and regional training." "For how long?" 6 months to start." Silence lingered. Not heavy, not dramatic, just real. Victoria folded her hands. "You're ready," she said. Ethan blinked. "You built the outreach system from scratch," she continued. "You stabilized it. You trained leadership teams. You created structure." He swallowed. "You don't need me here every day anymore," he said quietly, as she looked at him steadily. "I don't need anyone here every day anymore." That was the truth, and they both knew it. The following weeks moved quickly. Ethan transitioned responsibilities. Regional directors stepped up. Victoria delegated more decisively than ever before. It wasn't detachment, it was designed. On Ethan's final full week in Seattle before his first advisory rotation, the foundation hosted a community forum. The room was full of grant recipients, volunteers, families, and press. Victoria wheeled to the podium. "I've been asked many times what changed my recovery," she began. She didn't glance at notes. It wasn't funding. It wasn't recognition. It wasn't even standing again. The room quieted. It was a partnership. She looked directly at Ethan. Someone stayed when leaving would have been easier. Ethan held her gaze but didn't lower his head. "But partnership isn't ownership," she continued. "It's not dependency. It's growth." She turned back to the audience. And growth sometimes means stepping into bigger rooms." Applause began softly, then grew. Later, outside the building, the idle air cooled against their faces. Ethan stood beside her car. "This isn't goodbye," he said. "I know. You'll call if things fall apart." She smiled faintly. "They won't. You're confident." "I'm structured." He laughed softly. There was no dramatic farewell, no emotional collapse, just acknowledgement. He bent slightly, not to help her, but to meet her eye level. You didn't fall," he said quietly. "Neither did you," she replied. He nodded once, then stepped back. The car door closed, and he walked away. Not because he was leaving something broken, Because he was leaving something built. Months passed. Victoria traveled more, spoke nationally, advocated fiercely, but she no longer centered herself in every room. She built panels, elevated others, delegated voice. One afternoon, during a large mobility innovation conference in Chicago, she spotted Ethan across the hall. He was speaking to a group of nonprofit directors, animated and confident. She didn't interrupt. She didn't approach. She watched. Later, he found her near the stage. "You look different," he said. "Healthier?" she guessed. "Grounded?" She nodded. "I feel it." They walked toward the elevator, side by side. No urgency. No need to define anything. "How's your mother?" she asked. "Stable," he said. "Stronger." "And Lily?" "Graduated." She smiled. "It's good." They reached the elevator. For a brief moment, silence wrapped around them. "You built something that outlasts us," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We built something that builds others." He nodded. That was better. Back in Seattle, Silvercrest Heights no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a headquarters. Victoria continued therapy. Parallel bars became short hallway distances. Short hallway distances became assisted outdoor steps. Not because she was chasing full recovery, but because she refused stagnation. One morning, she stood outside the frame again, not for 4 seconds, not for 10, for nearly 20. Her breathing is steady, her focus is forward, no one in the room. She wasn't performing, she was progressing. When she sat back down, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't call anyone. She just smiled quietly. Later that week, the foundation celebrated its 1,000th grant approval. The number wasn't symbolic. It was structural. That's 1,000 families reached. 1,000 moments where mobility meant access. During the celebration, a young woman approached Victoria. "You don't remember me," she said. Victoria tilted her head slightly. "My wheelchair broke last year," the woman continued. "I was the one crawling around my house." Recognition flickered. "You approved my repair within a day." Victoria smiled softly. "You're walking now?" she asked. "With braces," the woman said proudly. "Oh, and studying architecture." Victoria's eyes brightened. "Good," she said. As the woman walked away, Victoria felt something deeper than pride. Purpose. That night, alone in her office, she stared at the old framed magazine covers. She didn't turn them face down. She didn't elevate them. She left them where they were. Part of the story, not the headline. If you've stayed with this story from the first shattered porcelain cup to this moment, where standing isn't the miracle, and impact is, take a second right now and hit that like button. And if this journey reminded you that strength isn't dominance, it's adaptation, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment below. What mattered more in the end, her walking again, or her widening her reach? Because the truth is simple. She didn't need to walk perfectly. She needed to move forward, and she did. Not alone, not dependent, but transformed. Victoria rolled toward the therapy rail one last time that evening, placed her hands, shifted forward, stood, balanced, and instead of whispering, "Don't let me fall," she whispered, "I've got this." And this time, she believed it. The first time Victoria walked 5 full steps without the parallel bars, there were no cameras, no applause, no announcement. It happened in the quiet of early morning. The house staff hadn't arrived yet. The city outside was just beginning to stir. The light through the windows was soft, pale, almost forgiving. And she positioned herself carefully near the hallway rail. One hand lightly touches the wall. Breathe steady. She shifted her weight. Step. Her foot landed firmly. Step. Her leg trembled, but held. Step. The 4th felt uncertain. The 5th surprised her. Then she stopped. Not because she fell, because she didn't need to push further. She lowered herself slowly into the chair, heart pounding, not from fear, just effort. 5 steps. It wasn't the distance that mattered, it was the choice. And later that day, during a strategy meeting, a board member said something that would have triggered her months ago. "We should consider a CEO transition plan," he said cautiously. "The foundation is scaling nationally. Institutional leadership will eventually be necessary." The room went quiet. Eyes shifted toward her. Old Victoria would have bristled, defended, asserted control. New Victoria didn't. "That's wise," she said calmly. Several heads lifted. "Nah, I'm not the only capable leader in this room," she continued, "and this organization must outlast my involvement." The board member nodded slowly. After the meeting, one advisor pulled her aside. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," she replied simply. In the months that followed, the foundation expanded into a national network. Regional directors operated independently. Policies were standardized. Audits were transparent. Yes, the Adrian Cole Mobility Trust no longer felt like an extension of Victoria's recovery. It felt like an ecosystem. Ethan's advisory work took him across the country: Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, Phoenix. They didn't call daily, they didn't need to, but sometimes, late in the evening, a simple message would appear. "Back from DC panels went well," or "Therapy sessions strong today." No drama, no dependency, just acknowledgement. One afternoon, nearly a year after the first storm, numb Victoria stood in her living room again. The fireplace had been repaired months ago. The porcelain had been replaced, but she had kept one small fragment of that shattered teacup in her desk drawer, not as a reminder of anger, as a marker of beginning. She placed her hands lightly against the hallway rail, shifted forward, walked, not 5 steps, not 10, 15, slow, measured, intentional. When she reached the end of the hallway, she paused. There was no one to catch her, no one to steady her, no one needed to. She turned carefully and walked back. Later that evening, she attended a national accessibility policy forum virtually. A senator asked her directly, "Would you erase the accident if you could?" The question hung heavy. She thought carefully before answering. "I would erase the loss," she said honestly, "but not the lesson." The room quieted. "I learned that control is fragile," she continued, "but impact is scalable. I lost movement. I gained reach." Her voice didn't tremble, it anchored. After the call ended, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she stood again, not to prove anything, just because she could. A few weeks later, Ethan returned to Seattle for a regional leadership summit. They met in the foundation's conference room. No mansion walls, no therapy frames, just policy maps and strategic plans. "You've built something sustainable," he said, scanning the reports. "We've built it," she corrected. He smiled slightly. I'm proud of you," he said. She didn't deflect. "Thank you." They walked through the outreach department together. Staff greeted him warmly. Systems ran smoothly. He watched her as she addressed the team, not dominating, not commanding, guiding. Balanced. "You don't need me here anymore," he said quietly when they stepped aside. She met his gaze. "I don't need anyone here in the way I used to," she replied. "And that's good? That's strength?" He nodded slowly. That evening, they stood outside the foundation building. The Seattle skyline stretched behind them. "You ever miss the delivery van?" she asked lightly. He laughed. "No." "Good. You ever miss being untouchable?" She considered that carefully. "No," she said finally. "It was lonely." They stood in comfortable silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because nothing needed proving, because the ending isn't in the steps, it's in the shift. Victoria adjusted her stance one final time that night. No frame, no rail, just balance. She took one slow step forward, then another. Not perfect, not effortless, but hers. And for the first time since the accident, she didn't think about falling. She thought about the future, and that was enough. The anniversary came quietly. 1 year since the storm. 1 year since the night the wheelchair battery died. And something inside her shifted with it. Victoria didn't mark it publicly. There was no press release, no commemorative post. But she woke before dawn. She wheeled into the living room and stood in the exact spot where the candles had once flickered. The house was silent. She closed her eyes and let the memory come. The fear, the darkness, the whisper, "Don't drop me." She inhaled slowly, then opened her eyes. "I won't," she said to herself this time. She walked 10 steady steps across the marble floor, not to measure distance, to measure belief. Later that morning, the foundation hosted a roundtable discussion for young entrepreneurs with disabilities. Victoria chose not to sit at the head of the table. She positioned herself among them. A young man with a spinal injury leaned forward. How do you rebuild when your entire identity was built on something you lost? He asked. The room held its breath. Victoria didn't answer immediately. You don't rebuild the same structure, she said finally. You build with new materials. He frowned slightly. As a meaning? I built my first company on control, she continued. After the accident, control wasn't available to me in the same way. So I built on adaptability instead. She met his eyes. Control isolates, adaptability connects. The young man nodded slowly. After the session, as attendees filtered out, one of the foundation's newest regional directors approached her. We're ready to launch internationally, she said. Victoria raised an eyebrow slightly. Canada first, the director added quickly. Small expansion. Victoria smiled faintly. Prepare the framework, she said. No hesitation, no fear. That evening, Ethan called from Chicago. Canada, he said when she mentioned it. Yes. He laughed softly. You don't do small? I do sustainable, she corrected. How are the steps? Steadier. And the fear? She paused. Quieter. He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I'm glad. So am I. They didn't linger on the call. They didn't need to. Their roles had evolved, not caretaker and patient, not employer and employee, but architects of something shared. Months later, during a national mobility summit in Vancouver, Victoria walked onto the stage using a lightweight cane. Not because she needed it for every step, but because she respected where she had been. The audience didn't gasp. They didn't pity. They listened. I used to think my accident was the worst thing that could happen to me, she began, as she moved carefully but confidently across the stage. I was wrong. The room stilled. The worst thing that could have happened, she continued, was staying the same. A ripple of recognition moved through the audience. Loss forces clarity, she said, and clarity forces choice. She stopped center stage. You can cling to who you were, or you can build who you are now. Applause rose gradually. Earned. After the summit, as she walked slowly toward the backstage corridor, she paused. Not from exhaustion, from awareness. She wasn't walking perfectly. She wasn't cured, but she was moving. Forward. And that was enough. Back in Seattle, Silvercrest Heights no longer felt like a monument to what she had lost. It felt like a starting point for what she continued to build. One evening, alone in her office, she opened the drawer containing the small porcelain fragment from the shattered teacup. She held it briefly, then placed it back, not as a reminder of anger, meant as proof of transformation. If you've stayed with this story all the way to the end, through storms, setbacks, growth, expansion, and quiet strength, pause right now and hit that like button. And if this journey reminded you that strength is not about standing alone, but standing differently, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment below. What was the true shift for you? The moment she stood without fear, or the moment she chose impact over image? Because here's the truth. And she didn't become powerful again when she walked. She became powerful when she let go of control. Victoria stood once more in the center of the living room. No cane, no rail, just balance. She took one step, then another. Not chasing perfection, not racing a timeline, just moving. And this time, she didn't whisper, "Don't let me fall." She didn't whisper anything at all. She simply walked forward, and that was her victory. 2 years later, no one remembered the number 23, not the board, and not the press, not even most of the staff. But Victoria did. 23 caregivers had walked out of Silvercrest Heights before Ethan walked in. 23 versions of herself that weren't ready to be seen. The foundation now operates in 5 countries. Regional hubs managed operations with minimal interference from headquarters. Policy advisors quoted the Adrian Cole Mobility Trust in federal hearings. Universities taught case studies on adaptive leadership using her model. But growth didn't erase memory. One morning, Victoria stood in the foundation lobby as a new intake coordinator, nervously prepared for her first client meeting. "She's difficult," the coordinator whispered. Victoria tilted her head slightly. "How so?" "Angry, dismissive, refuses assistance." A faint, knowing smile touched Victoria's lips. "Good," she said. The coordinator blinked. "Good?" "Yes," Victoria replied calmly. That means she still cares. She walked, without a cane now, down the hallway toward the meeting room. Her stride wasn't flawless. It didn't need to be. Inside, a woman in her early 40s sat stiffly in a wheelchair, arms crossed tightly. "I don't need charity," the woman said, before Victoria even spoke. Victoria pulled a chair across from her. "This isn't charity," she said evenly. "It's access." The woman scoffed. "You think I want this?" she snapped, gesturing to her chair. Victoria didn't flinch. "No," she said quietly. "But I know you don't want to disappear either." The woman froze. Silence stretched. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "You're not difficult," she continued. "You're grieving." The woman's jaw tightened, but her eyes flickered. "I lost my business," she muttered. "I lost mine too," Victoria replied. That was enough. No agreement, not surrender, just recognition. After the meeting, the coordinator approached Victoria. "Nah, how did you do that?" she asked. Victoria didn't smile. "I remembered who I used to be." That evening, Victoria stood alone in the foundation's rooftop garden. Seattle's skyline glowed under soft dusk light. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Board-approved nationwide employment reintegration model. It's official." She typed back, "You built that." His reply came quickly. "We built it." She looked out over the city. 2 years ago, she had stood in darkness, begging not to be dropped. Now she was holding structures that supported thousands. The shift hadn't been dramatic. It had been deliberate. Later that week, the foundation held its annual summit. Victoria walked onto the stage without assistance. The applause wasn't about her steps. It was about what those steps represented. She paused at see the enter stage. "I used to think resilience meant standing back up," she began. "But resilience isn't about returning to who you were." The room quieted. "It's about refusing to stay where you fell." She let the words settle. "I didn't rebuild my old life. I built a better one." Applause rose slowly, earned, not explosive, intentional. After the summit, as the crowd dispersed, Ethan approached her near the stage stairs. "You don't lean anymore," he observed. She raised an eyebrow. "Physically or metaphorically?" "Both." She smiled faintly. I learned balance." He nodded. "You also learned delegation." "That too." They stood side by side, watching volunteers dismantle the stage equipment. "Do you ever think about the storm?" he asked. "Sometimes." "And?" "I'm grateful." He blinked slightly. "For the storm?" "For the clarity." Silence settled between them, not awkward, just complete. If you followed this story from the first shattered porcelain cup to this rooftop skyline, pause right now and hit that like button. Thus, and if this journey reminded you that strength is not dominance, but direction, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment below. What do you think truly transformed her, the accident or the decision she made afterward? Because here's the final truth. The accident changed her circumstances. Her decision changed her legacy. Victoria stepped down from the stage slowly, not because she had to, because she chose her pace now. She walked across the polished floor, each step steady. Not flawless, not effortless, but intentional. At the exit, she paused briefly and looked back at the hall that once would have intimidated her. Now it felt small, not because she had grown physically taller, but because her reach extended far beyond it. Ethan fell into step beside her, not ahead, not behind. Equal distance, equal stride. "You know," he said quietly, "the first time I walked into Silvercrest Heights, I thought I was there to survive." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know I was there to build." She nodded once. "So was I." They stepped out into the cool Seattle night. No cameras, no audience, no urgency. Just forward, and this time, neither of them needed someone to catch them. They had learned how to stand, differently, and that was the real victory.